To be completely transparent, let me start this off by stating that I'm not a huge Star Wars fanatic. Don't get me wrong, I really like the series, but at most I think I'd consider myself to be a casual fan of the franchise, especially in comparison to a lot of the diehards that I know of. I love certain elements of the setting and theming. I really like Knights of the Old Republic 2 and Kreia. I love Revenge of the Sith and Empire Strikes Back, and I was really moved by Rogue One. But overall, I never really connected with the series holistically in the way that I do with a lot of my strong favorites. Until Andor. Sorry to be predictable, but this show helped me to connect with the universe in a way that I never had before. It is full of potent theming, fantastic visual storytelling, and political messaging that pulls no punches whatsoever and fully follows through. But usually the element of stories that I tend to appreciate most is quality character writing, and Andor has that in spades. The raw human hope of Cassian, the unbreakable, unflinching, and powerful resolve of Luthen, the terrifying journey to rebellion for Mon Mothma. But at the end of it all, the character who I found left the biggest impression, even if he isn't my favorite, was Syril Karn. The one who, despite his immense flaws and in fact because of them, I view to be the most pitiable, pathetic, and beautifully tragic in the story. Syril is incredibly unlikable at first, dogmatically opposing Cassian and adhering to strict principles that bind him to an unflinching and tunnel-visioned loyalty to the Empire. But as the layers are peeled back, we slowly begin to understand why and how he became that way, as well as how that fits in with his role in the story. And of course, none of this excuses the horrific things he does, nor does it mean to shrink the impact of his cruelty and narrow-mindedness. I simply want to explore what this series means to say about how Syril became the way he became and why he ended up as he did. Having grown up in Coruscant with his formative years overlapping with the height of the Clone Wars, his mind and motivations were warped by politics and propaganda, and he grew to adore everything that he thought the Galactic Empire stood for. And this was of course the Empire's desire, to manipulate vulnerable minds like Syril's in this cruelly effective way. He was a true believer, as communicated through his clone trooper action figures and his professional trajectory from that point on. And this was only exacerbated by his home life. With his father largely absent, his mother Edie would constantly criticize him and only fueled his adherence for structure and discipline, causing him to lean into an unyielding set of rules for his life. And that combined with his budding ideals caused him to desire to enact his justice on the world in the way that he had been taught the Empire functioned. Syril is not at all maniacal, malicious, or coldly pragmatic. In fact, he's the opposite and actually mirrors some notable characters from the Rebellion. He has a strong sense of justice, so he very clearly cares about right and wrong and desires to do things properly as shown through his introduction. But his ideas of justice diverge from both the lazy self-interest and indolence that he experiences in the Empire and of the sides chosen by the rebels. Syril harbors a romantic and skewed idealization of what the Empire represents and is horribly misled. He is on an island, on his own, and the catalyst of Cassian's quote-unquote crimes offers him the perfect combination of factors to kickstart his reverse journey, as he demonstrates a large lack of the pragmatism needed to survive in this setting with your ideals intact. And as a result, he resigns himself unknowingly to the futility of being a cog in the wheel, ripe for being powerless, used, manipulated, and tossed aside, to demonstrate the cruelty of the Empire. In large part due to the real-world implications, nothing in the entire Star Wars mythos got across the cruelty of the Empire as much as the slaughter in Season 2, Episode 8, Who Are You, for me. But it would not have hit in the way it did without Syril's role throughout the entire thing. Yet, it was only going to end in one way for him, and that was in large part due to his demonization and projection of the injustices of the world upon a character that he may have been able to collaborate and bond with in a different life.
Within Syril's journey, he becomes so fixated and obsessed with Cassian because he recognizes that potential could exist within himself. And that this guy who's so free to just do what he wants, and Syril lives within the confines of his own structure and the structure of the bureaucratic corporate system that he lives in and is striving to ascend up to the highest echelons of. He sees this person just like making up the rules as he goes along, and he just can't stand it.
Yeah.
But it's because, as you say, it's the other side of his coin.
While being opposites and diverging in many ways, Syril and Cassian are not so different in others. While Cassian's relationship with belief and hope contrasts his own almost diametrically in places, he is envious and jealous of what he views as Cassian's agency and freedom, maybe on a subconscious level, because the man is enacting his own form of justice on the world in a way that Syril wishes he could. Cassian seems unbound in a way that Syril sort of subconsciously yearns for. He is a hero in the way that Syril wants to be, but the walls close more and more around Syril while Cassian seems to have none in Cyril's perspective, even if that could not be farther from the truth. He wants to be like him, to have his potential, and since his upbringing made him incapable of seeing nuance, anything that isn't within his own strict set of rules is immediately something to be eradicated. And so when he sees Cassian squandering his freedom with misdeeds and injustice, he cannot let that go and cannot see it as anything but a sin, because his world is comprised of two categories: anything that benefits the Empire, and enemies. That is, until Gorman. Syril was posted on Gorman in order to gather intelligence on how to agitate justification for a full-scale slaughter of the planet in order for the Empire to use it to gather materials for the Death Star. However, Syril wasn't aware of this and simply thought he was posing as a sympathizer in order to gauge the situation and probe for information about outside agitators. And through doing this, Syril made something approaching friends. He connected with these people and came to like and respect them. And that is why when Captain Kaido came in and began to lean into full-blown destruction, Syril sensed that things were wrong, that it should not be this way. These were good people undeserving of this treatment, and surely the Empire he loved could not be dealing out injustice and cruelty like this. But it ended up being just as he feared, and after he confronted Dedra, he realized that it was all a sham, that he was nothing but a tool. That despite his dreams and wishes and ideals and want to rise up and help the world and be free, he was always nothing, and he never had any freedom nor chance of it from the start.
Who are you?
Who are you is such a significant question for Cassian to ask Syril here, and it is without doubt one of the best lines in the show. There is of course the profound impact of the fact that after all this time, after all the energy and passion that Syril put into hunting him down, Cassian had no idea who he was. Cassian was the person that Syril obsessed with, developed such hate towards, and had a parallel yet inverse, intertwined journey with, the literal center of his life in a way. And he had no clue who he was. More than anything else, this drives home the futility and pointlessness that his life had felt like in that moment, how much the game was rigged from the start, and the fact that he really hadn't accomplished anything nor done anything of true value. But there is far more to this than that if you take a moment and ponder what Syril was thinking when he was asked that question. Would he even have been able to answer? He had found himself at odds with himself. The Gormans were meant to be the enemies, but he found them to be very good people. Yet he was always defined by his duty, so where did that put him? As someone without a valid sense of identity, whose actions betrayed his heart, who didn't know where he stood whilst being surrounded by the mass of death that he was complicit in, faced with a hollow and empty personification of his hatred and unable to even act against him, when questioned about who he was, did Syril even know? Does he know who he is? Is he anybody? His entire desire was to become more than a nobody, to get acknowledgement and validation and respect on his way to making his mark on the world. But he never got it despite all that he did for the Imperial machine. He remained a nobody, a ground-level grunt completely uninformed about the true plans with no importance whatsoever and no power. How foolish would he sound explaining who he is to Cassian, why he hated him so much? It would sound like utter lunacy. Truly, who is he? He thought he was Syril Karn, arbiter of justice and truth. He wanted repute, but he hasn't ever been someone interested in empty titles achieved through simply going along with the pragmatic tide, ever. He wanted to do good. That's why when he realized that those he cared for were hurt by his actions, he immediately began spiraling, because he felt like he had contributed to something that betrayed his heart, his idea of what good meant. His current path in life would grant him some of the notoriety that he desired, but it would be empty and hollow, because he wanted to do good as well as gaining respect. But the Empire isn't a place for do-gooders, and Syril realized that all too late. In a more forgiving world and story, one that would sugarcoat the realities of war, Syril's redemption and turnaround would have begun the moment he started pondering Cassian's question. But the world did not accommodate that. In addition to all of this, I think it's very valid to have total opposite interpretations of Syril's reaction to and processing of Cassian's words here. He pauses, reflects, and conveys an expression of agony and hopelessness. But what exactly did he feel? In this moment, did he realize that he had no reason to hate Cassian because he had been misguided this entire time? Was he overcome with hatred at the absurdity of the situation? Was he just simply overwhelmed by the depth and power of his feelings towards this man that he could level all of his blame at? Was it a paradoxical mix of both? Either way, it simply didn't matter, and before any change of heart could manifest, he hit the floor and couldn't even give an answer, ensuring that to Cassian, the man in front of him remained no one. A tragic, pathetically fitting ending to a somber cautionary story and one of the most powerful moments of television in recent memory. Syril desired to be a free man of justice and goodness, garnering acclaim and respect and love, seamlessly fitting in with the romantic vision of the empire that he had built for himself. But instead, he died a tool, contributing to the mass slaughter of a people that he cared for, totally and completely trapped, and confronted in the most brutal way with the fact that his empire was undeniably tyrannical, oppressive, fascist, and evil, and that he was complicit in their success. Syril was not an evil person. He's someone who lacked structure and nurturing and warmth in his life, who made poor judgment decisions and as a result poured himself into something that exploited him from the inside out. And because of this, he is easily one of the most tragic Star Wars characters ever. With Syril, there is no redemption, no hope, no light at the end of the tunnel, just a hollow existence devoid of the meaning that he sought, and a pathetic, nearly meaningless death. And it's crushingly appropriate, because the evil of the Empire cannot be properly communicated without cases like Syril's. Not only showing the visceral cruelty of mass death that it deals out, but also through displaying the cold dismissal that it shows towards those that it manipulates for its own machinations. And arguably the saddest part of this all is that there are without doubt many stories similar to Syril's within the universe. Hundreds and thousands without evil intent who die as exploited nobodies. And while there ultimately was hope that was acquired as the story continued from here, there was nothing even approaching a semblance of light for the story of Syril Karn. Many thanks for watching.